Nearly a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, local communities are still adjusting their operations and how they communicate ongoing changes with their constituents. In some ways, the pandemic has accelerated opportunities for local governments to make lasting service changes and streamline processes. What will life in the pandemic bring in 2021? And how will local officials pivot their communications? Welcome to the Adlibber podcast, featuring conversations of influence, some of it planned, much of it ad-libbed.
Welcome back to the Adlibber. I'm your host, Jay Scott. Today on the podcast, we're talking government communications in the era of COVID-19. How do you pivot your message to the public during a prolonged pandemic? Joining me is special guest Philip Given, Chief of Staff for York Mayor Michael Helfrich. Thanks for joining us today on the Adlibber.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Thanks for having us.
So COVID-19's obviously disrupted life in a big way. Obviously, last winter, we first got a taste of this, and it's still very much with us here in 2021 and continues to impact operations for businesses and government and daily life for many people. Can you talk to me a little bit about how York adjusted its communications approach last year, effectively getting your message out to residents and businesses in the city?
Yeah, and we are now approaching, as we get through January and enter February, we are approaching really when this started to come on our radar in 2020. We had our first all staff management meeting where we mentioned COVID-19 in February, and at that point, obviously, not only were we still trying to learn what that meant as an employer, as a municipality, as an organization that provides services to our residents, but we also are the host of the City of York Bureau of Health. So we are uniquely positioned. Obviously, employers have had to pivot, municipalities have had to pivot, healthcare systems have had to pivot, and the City of York as an entity is all three of those things. So the challenges that we have have certainly been unique, and I don't think that even in February and March of 2020, we could have predicted what those next 12 months would have looked like. So a number of difficult conversations, a number of what seemed at the time to be very repetitive meetings and conversations, all to prepare us to better serve our residents. I don't think in March anyone could have predicted the level of shutdowns that happened. We couldn't have predicted the impact that our business community faced. These are all issues that we had to deal with at the same time, acting as an employer and attempting to take care of our employees and keep them safe. So it's definitely been a challenge, but I think that we have served our community certainly to the best of our ability, but also working with regional partners to get through this thing.
Would you say it's been easier or harder to reach people during COVID, knowing that everybody was largely put in a similar position, working remotely, maybe for a little while, or they still are? Is it actually easier to get your message out during COVID because everyone's so plugged into their computer, or, they need to know things a little bit differently than they did pre-COVID?
Yeah, I think in many ways it amplified our different audiences. York, as a growing city, we certainly have a population of young, connected individuals that from the beginning were tuned in, aware, and cautious related to COVID-19 and how that impacted their life. At the same time, we have issues that many other issues face, and we have a large population of our residents that are below the poverty line, possibly have English not as their first language, many homes without access to internet. So we have to reach that population as well. And again, not to belabor the point, but we are both trying to do that as a public health entity and as a municipality that has realistic things like parking tickets and tax bills and sewer bills that we have to collect on a regular basis. So I think that for some things that we do, COVID actually made it a little bit easier to get connected with our residents. But in many ways, the challenges that we had prior to COVID were amplified, and that required us to pivot our approach and modify the way that we do business in many ways. Off the top of my head, thinking of things like building permits, for example, that was a process that prior to COVID we had been looking at how to bring online and to make that a truly electronic process, but hadn't taken the steps to implement it. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, we have now brought a number of our permits and payment processing systems online to help facilitate that. Understanding that people need to continue operating their businesses in some fashion, work continues to happen in the city of York, but limiting that in-person contact when possible.
What would you say are the biggest differences between communicating externally with the residents, the businesses about those kind of changes versus, obviously internally it's a change as well. I mean, you have a lot of employees that, probably aren't used to, not be maybe in the office because that's just the way it's always been. What are the biggest differences you saw in, internal versus external communications?
Yeah, and again, it's our employees are representative of our population and sort of run the gamut between people who adapted really well and were quick to understand what working remotely looks like. And then we have folks that when we started work from home, they would ask, when are we getting back to work? And it's, well, we are at work right now. So learning how to connect with our coworkers and really giving them the tools so that they are comfortable working from home, because there are some folks that are just not comfortable working from home or don't have the appropriate resources, technology to do that. You're absolutely right. The first thing we had to do was get our team positioned and equipped to work from home. From there, it's then looking at processes within the government and how customers typically have interacted with those employees or with that department. There are some services and there are some processes and workflows that obviously cannot be done remotely. We still have potholes, we still have street lights that go out, we still have snow that blankets our streets. We have a dedicated public works crew, the police force, the fire department. Those guys cannot work from home, but what we can do is limit their contact with each other while they are working, take precautions to limit their exposure to residents, that sort of thing. On the resident side, trying to get people to understand that the expectation that if you walk into City Hall today, for example, yes, if you walk into City Hall, you can pay your parking ticket and your tax bill, but the expectation that you can walk into City Hall and meet with some of the people that you may traditionally have been able to meet with just isn't there. We need to reinforce that for the foreseeable future, until we have a widely vaccinated population, this is the new normal. And that's been a challenge to reach to residents and our employees. But I think that as we enter 2021, people have sort of settled in and understand what the future looks like.
That's a good point. I mean, obviously you talked about some things that can't be done remotely, and you mentioned building permits and some services, things that, the process might be a little bit different. What are some of the permanent changes you expect we'll see because of the pandemic in terms of how cities like York, and obviously a lot of folks are in the same boat. What are some things that might stick with us in terms of operational changes because of what we've experienced in the last year?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is going to be the online permitting center and the online customer response center. The permitting process, when you look at municipalities, typically is just long, drawn out, and historically has been an in-person, on-paper process, whether it's a health inspection or a plumber's license, tenant-occupied inspection renewals. That typically, both because of the industry that is behind it and the municipalities, it's really just kind of a cumbersome, hulking process. What we've seen is that tech has finally realized that this needs to be a focused. The platform that we are using is called City Grows, and we are one of about 100 municipalities that are on board that platform. So we're really early adopters on what they are doing. And we give direct feedback to their development team on what our employees are seeing and how our employees need to work through these workflows and processes. And that's been a really fun and engaging experience for our team, and I think for the City Grows team who launched that platform. So that's not going to go anywhere. And we are in conversations with other municipalities that are interested in using that platform for their online permitting system, giving them feedback, giving them advice on how they can streamline their processes. And then as they work through and build out some of their applications or permits, that sort of thing, we can take best practices from them. So it has created this collaborative environment where we can, in this platform, we can see what San Diego is doing, for example, for their large item pickup. If you have a couch or a TV that you have to set out to the curb, we can see what their permit looks like and mesh that with ours and come up with ultimately what is a better product. Now, obviously, there are other platforms that have done online permitting for municipalities, but I think that what we will start to see is that it's no longer a first-class city exclusive thing. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have had online permitting for probably a decade, but it's now trickling in, and I think that you'll start to see it in smaller townships and boroughs as well, because frankly, it reduces staff time and it makes things easier for the customer, which is the ultimate goal.
Would you say that in some ways the pandemic's accelerated some new opportunities, or made things a little bit better for city governments, at least the third class cities and others that maybe haven't traditionally been at the front of the line when it comes to technology? Is it accelerated the opportunities that you have? Obviously, that sounds like it's, to me, what you're saying, it sounds like it's been a good thing in that respect, and maybe it helps you in the long run.
Yeah, and if you look at municipalities and as an entity, they are just like some other institution level entities where they might dip their toe into something, but it takes quite a bit of time to fully immerse themselves. I think COVID has really put the entire world in a sink or swim situation as far as pivoting and modifying your operations. I think that what it has done is realize that there are efficiencies that we can gain from not just working remotely, but really focusing on the end goal for our consumer, which in our case is the residents. And what hurdles and barriers can we get out of the way so that we're really connecting our employees who are providing services to our residents who need to receive services. If we look at that on a base level, I think that COVID has put us in that position where we need to make those difficult decisions to say, okay, maybe we were wasting time here. Maybe this wasn't the best approach in the past, even though that is how it has always been done. It's time to look at this with a critical eye and see what this process looks like in the future.
Switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about economic development and obviously urban living. We know cities depend on economic activity in terms of new businesses coming in, redevelopment activity that drives new residents and amenities into the city. New York's been experiencing that over the last number of years, just like a lot of other places. How do you, as the vaccination process continues to unfold, how do you explain to constituents that, I guess the tide is turning, or when will you know that it actually feels like it is enough where you can effectively say, come back down if you haven't been in a while, or at least explain that the city's open and it's safe and we're doing everything we can to continue to adhere to health guidelines?
Yeah, and it's something that we have struggled with, again, because we are a public health entity, because we are a city, we have a responsibility to keep our residents safe. We also have that other part of us that needs to continue to build this city into the most prosperous version of itself that it can be. We have, on the Bureau of Health side, we've received about $4 million in COVID-19 funding through the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the CDC. On the economic development side, we've received about $1 million through CDBG COVID-19 funding. Both of those allocations of funds are for direct response to our city residents and their needs. On the public health side of things, we've used that for contact tracing, to build a dashboard, and really a lot of that has gone into what has essentially been a state of emergency since March of last year. On the economic development side, one of the first things that we did was create a micro business grant program where we made grants of up to $5,000 available to city businesses that were owned by city residents. We identified early on that this was going to be a situation where the bills were going to keep coming for our restaurant owners, for our businesses, and we at least wanted to do what we could do to get them some money quickly, honestly, to make ends meet. And that problem is going to continue. We're looking at potentially doing another round of that. Obviously, there will be another round of CARES Act funding coming from the federal government, and hopefully additional funding coming to our small businesses. We obviously saw development slow in 2020. Some projects came to an unfortunate screeching halt, but we think that in 2021, we will see businesses that really took an opportunity in 2020 and during the COVID-19 pandemic to pivot, to reimagine what their business looks like, to reinvent themselves. I think in 21 and 22, we are going to see them prosper. And the city of York is here to support them with whatever they need. We've also in 2020 launched our partnership with Kiva, where small businesses can get no interest loans to build their business. We really are focused on our city-owned businesses, building them and really getting out of their way so that they can be as successful as they can. At the same time, we understand that larger employers are realizing that work at home probably is here to stay, and in the long run probably saves them a little bit of money. So we are definitely concerned with larger employers leaving and what we can do to backfill some of those spaces. But that, as you said, is not a York exclusive problem. That is something that we will see in urban environments across the United States. I think our focus has to be in the response and supporting the existing businesses as best we can to make sure that they are positioned really to serve our residents and our community when we come out the other end of this thing.
Yeah, it's not a York only problem. Every city in the country has been trying to figure out ways to address that. Looking forward, you mentioned this year and kind of where you see next year maybe going, but beyond that, life with COVID and life beyond COVID, what are some other trends you're expecting you'll see from, in urban living that York can look to incorporate in the next few years? How do you lay the groundwork for some of those things during COVID and set yourselves up for long-term success?
Well, I think York is geographically, we are also uniquely positioned because we are surrounded by what is probably the most dense area of distribution and warehouse networks on the East Coast. So our focus at city government is to build walkable jobs. If we cannot build walkable jobs, what we need to do is prop up our residents so that they have access to public transportation to get to some of these jobs. I think that there are parts of the country where the economy will be changed forever. I think that York on the other end of this looks pretty similar to what it did in 2019 and 2020. But as e-commerce triples over the next 5 years, York is uniquely positioned because of our geography and our existing infrastructure that currently supports these massive distribution hubs in the county. We have 43,000 people in the city of York that are positioned directly in the center of this massive network of employment. And that's what we really need to focus on heading into the future, is making sure that as these businesses come into the counties that surround us and into York County directly, that our residents are first in line to have access to these jobs. I think that there are urban environments that will be permanently changed by COVID, and we are certainly very concerned and very focused on the success of our restaurant retail community, for example. But as far as the residents themselves, I think that York will actually be in a better spot on the other end of this because of the booming e-commerce and distribution business that directly surrounds our city. So truthfully, it has identified something that we're pretty excited about. We just need to make sure that we can plug our residents into those opportunities as best we can.
Yeah, I think you've made a lot of obviously good points with that. I mean, where there's a lot of things that have been happening, and some things have been accelerated. Certainly, the e-commerce aspect, and everything from a warehouse and distribution side that continues to evolve in York County's right in the thick of things. So, and the city itself is a driver of a lot because of the population base and where folks are going to work inside the city and outside the city. So, obviously, given us a lot of great insights as far as COVID communications, how the city's been, pivoting its message and reacting to what's been going on, but also some of the proactive steps that you're taking that look like they'll be with us for the foreseeable future. So just wanted to thank you for coming on the Adlibber and talking to us about this, and good luck with the rest of 2021 and addressing city resident concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And our message, the city is here to serve. We are here to address the needs of our community. But what we need from the community right now is for people to stay home as much as possible, stay safe out there, wear your masks, get tested as often as you can if you have the ability to do that, and hang in there, and we'll get through this together.
Thank you for listening to the Adlibber podcast. To find new episodes and get more content from our team here at Gavin, make sure to visit our website at adlibberpodcast.com. The Adlibber is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.